Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Currently Speaking, the podcast of the Current Consulting Group. I'm Bill Current, president and founder of the Current Consulting Group. We're happy to have you join us for this episode called The Marijuana Stampede and Your Drug Testing Program. But before I start, I just invite you to check out our past episodes. You can find them at currentconsultinggroup.com. You'll see that we have just a whole bunch. We've been doing this for a little over a year now. We do it every week. And so there are a lot of episodes there in the archive if you'd like to check them out. We can also be found on all of the major podcast platforms. And if you go to YouTube and put in Currently Speaking, you'll find a lot of past episodes there as well. So feel free to join us. Now for today's episode. When it comes to the legalization of marijuana, we've come a long way in a short period of time. In a season 2 episode of one of my favorite shows, The West Wing, which originally aired on February 21st, 2001, Donna, the ever-curious and often misguided secretary to the Assistant Director of Communications, asked, "Is there anything to suggest there is a significant number of people who are inclined to smoke pot but don't because it's against the law?" Her boss answers no, to which she follows up with, "Then why do you think if it were decriminalized, there would be a sudden stampede of people showing up to work stoned, dragging down the economy and clearing supermarket aisles of Pringles and Twinkies?" Donna was an unsuspecting shill for what would become a very successful nationwide movement to legalize marijuana. Remember, that episode was from 2001. At the time the episode aired, only 8 states had legalized marijuana for medicinal use, including California, the first state to do so in 1996. About 10 years later, Washington and Colorado became the first states to legalize the so-called recreational use of marijuana in 2012. And today there are 24 states plus the District of Columbia that have legalized recreational marijuana use, and that number is constantly changing. It may have changed since I wrote this. And to answer Donna's question, with the benefit of more than 20 years of hindsight, there's been a stampede to use marijuana, generally speaking, but also while on the job. And it has definitely had a direct and negative impact on the economy in some ways. Fortunately, there seems to be no shortage of Pringles and Twinkies in supermarkets and convenience stores. Thank heavens. Here are the facts. There has been a dramatic increase in marijuana use that coincides with the ongoing and widespread legalization of marijuana. Significant percentages of people admit to using marijuana while on the job. Post-accident positivity for marijuana reached a 25-year high in 2023. And it could get worse. Back in May of 2024, former President Biden's Drug Enforcement Administration issued a notice of proposed rulemaking that essentially would have legalized marijuana by making it a Schedule III controlled substance instead of its normal listing as a Schedule I controlled substance, along with heroin and cocaine and other dangerous drugs. If enacted, which now appears very unlikely, thanks in large part to some very effective lobbying from NDASA, it would make it legal for doctors to prescribe marijuana for various ailments rather than simply recommend it. But according to the DEA's fact sheet, the DEA, remember, they came out with this notice of proposed rulemaking, but on their website, according to a fact sheet, marijuana may not be as benign as some legalization proponents claim. Now, here's a quote from the DEA's fact sheet. Quote, "The short-term effects of marijuana include problems with memory and learning, distorted perception, difficulty in thinking and problem solving, and loss of coordination. The effects of marijuana on perception and coordination are responsible for serious impairments in learning, associative processes, and psychomotor behavior, driving abilities." End of quote. Finally, regarding marijuana's effects on the body, the DEA states the following, quote, "Marijuana smokers experience serious health problems such as bronchitis, emphysema, and bronchial asthma. Extended use may cause suppression of the immune system. Withdrawal from chronic use of high doses of marijuana causes physical signs including headache, shakiness, sweating, and stomach pains and nausea." Wow! Difficulty in thinking and problem solving? Distorted perception? Sounds like marijuana and the workplace don't mix. It's not surprising, given the negative effects of using marijuana, that employees who use drugs are expensive to employ. There are many ways to add up what it costs to employ drug users, but here's the bottom line. The average cost of each substance abusing employee is $8,817 per year from lost productivity and increased accident and workers' compensation claims, according to the findings from NORC at the University of Chicago and the National Safety Council. From a cost perspective, drug abusing employee who is, for example, 5 times more likely to cause a workplace accident would cost his or her employer more than $8,800 per year, right, as cited above. Just focusing on workers' compensation costs alone, the average cost per claim in 2021-2022 was $44,179. If your company employs drivers, you'll want to know that same report found, quote, the most costly lost time workers' compensation claims by cause of injury result from motor vehicle crashes, averaging over $90,000 per workers' compensation claim. So, what can employers do to combat the problem? First, don't give up. Well, it's true that many states have legalized marijuana. No state prevents employers from holding workers accountable for being at work under the influence of marijuana. Next, keep your drug testing policy up to date and in compliance with applicable state marijuana laws. Ensure your policy states specifically that employees may not bring marijuana to the workplace, use marijuana while at work, or be impaired or under the influence of marijuana while on the job, regardless of when they used it. Finally, include marijuana in your drug testing program. To remove it from your drug test panel is an invitation for employees to use marijuana freely, which potentially increases a company's exposure to legal liability if an employee high on marijuana causes an accident that results in harm to another person. Also, be aware that many state workers' compensation regulations allow employers to move to deny benefits based on a positive drug test result. Here in Florida, where I live, for example, the regulation states, quote, compensation is not payable if the injury was occasioned primarily by the intoxication of the employee, by the influence of any drugs, barbiturates, or other stimulants not prescribed by a physician. Of course, if a company does not conduct post-accident drug testing specifically, they would lack the evidence necessary to move to deny a workers' comp claim filed by someone who had drugs in their system at the time of an accident. In safety-sensitive work environments, this could add up to a significant amount of savings lost by not conducting post-accident tests for marijuana. If you're interested in learning more about state drug testing laws, specifically as they relate to marijuana, contact the Current Consulting Group. We maintain a database of all laws at the state level that can affect drug testing, including marijuana laws and workers' comp regulations. It's called Current Compliance, and you can find information about it at our website at currentconsultinggroup.com. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Currently Speaking. Find us on all the major podcast platforms or find past episodes at our website at currentconsultinggroup.com. And thank you for joining us today. This concludes another episode of Currently Speaking.